Hello and happy Friday, everyone who is watching this. I am Dakota from Galt Advocacy, and I'm finally back to do our regular Friday live streams to talk about all things special needs. I have been gone for like 3 weeks in a row now, I think, because I had jury duty, but it's over now, and I'm back, and I'm so glad to be back. If you're watching this afterwards, we're going to be talking about all things related to IHSS providers. Everything from just the basics, what does a provider do? How do you become a provider? What do you need to know if you are a provider as far as sick time, as far as reporting your hours, all kinds of things like that. And then we'll get to questions as they come up. But for people that are joining us live or anyone who's watching this, I do want to go over, as we always do, upcoming things that are happening. The seminars we've been telling you guys about for like a month now are getting a lot closer. So we've got 2 seminars coming up in Southern California. And my goodness, I haven't said this in like 4 weeks, so I got to try and remember it. It's the first ones in Orange County, I believe, on Saturday the 25th. And the second one's in Glendale on Sunday the 26th. And that's of this month of April. So look forward to that. If you're in those areas, sign up for it on our website. It's completely free. It's going to run from 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock with maybe a little bit of time where you could meet with some of the advocates afterwards. Not really meet with, but, get a chance to talk to them as they're closing up shop and putting everything away. You might get a chance to talk to Myra, to Nicole, to the other Myra. Whoever else is there, you'll have a chance to just talk to them one-on-one and maybe get some questions answered while you're there. And as we've been mentioning, if you do sign up ahead of time for the free seminar on our website, when you arrive, give them your name, they check you off the list, and you will get a $25 gift card, I believe it is, as a thank you and to help pay for any transportation or food that you had to get to make it out. So look forward to that. Again, that's the 25th and the 26th. First one in Orange County and the second one in Glendale. And the rest of the details can be found on our website. So I see we've got a few people here already. So I'm going to bring up the topic that we had. Today we're going to be talking about all things providers. Now this is a very broad category. We could probably spend like 3 lives just talking about provider issues, about filling out timesheets and everything. But we're going to try and cover as much of an overview of all things providers as we can. But if you have specific questions, go ahead and leave them in the comment section, because I'm sure there'll be some more interesting things that you guys are wondering about than what we're going to get to just in our outline here. So I'm going to go over the basics. If you have a more specific question, leave it in the comment section, and I'll try and answer as much as I can. All right, so a provider. Your provider for IHSS, what does that mean? Well, as most of you probably already know, a provider is essentially the worker who does the job for a recipient of IHSS. So a recipient has some form of disability. They cannot perform some activities of daily living. They get IHSS, and then IHSS will pay a provider to help them with whatever they can't do. And the hours that the recipient gets, the provider claims those hours, gets paid for the time that they spent serving them. Now, that's the most basic. In, I think, the vast majority of cases, a person's provider is going to be someone they know, a family member or a friend or someone else who they've met with previously, who is aware of the disability and sees an opportunity to help this person out and be their provider. And very often it's parents or children of elderly people, or a sibling, an aunt or an uncle. Very often that's who the provider is going to end up being. And some providers might provide, full-time, 40 hours a week or more for someone who needs constant round-the-clock supervision, who needs extreme levels of care and all kinds of personal care tasks. And for other people, for other recipients, a provider might only help them with grocery shopping and laundry and meal preparation, only a few basic things, and a lot of their personal care needs they can take care of themselves. But that's the basics of what a provider is. Now, providers are limited in how many hours they can work in a week, but they can work for multiple recipients up to that maximum cap. So if you have one recipient who needs just 20 hours of help and another recipient who needs 30 hours of help, one provider can work for both of them and do a total of 50 hours a week of work. I see we've already got a comment, so I'm just going to jump to that real quick, and then we'll get back into just the basic overview. Maria said, "Hi, good afternoon. I have a son. He's 14. He has protective supervision. I do believe he is improving. He still has a lot of difficulties. I called the IHSS social worker to come and do a reevaluation. She never responded back or called me. Should I need to wait for the annual assessment?" Well, it depends. I mean, you mentioned that you said he's improving. If you think that he might no longer need protective supervision, I mean, they would ask you to call them and let them know, but you really don't have to do it right away. If it's you can wait till the annual, that's fine. But if you think there are areas that are not being met, areas that they're not, there are things that he needs help with that you're not being paid for currently, then I would, call them and insist, especially if the annual assessment's a long way away. If the annual assessment's going to be next month, doesn't really make much of a difference. It's going to happen soon anyway. But if the annual assessment's not for another 6 months and you see something that there's an area that's not being met, I'd say, yeah, call them and ask them to come out sooner. So that kind of leads into what we were about to talk about, which is how do you become a provider? Now, there are several steps, and every provider, whether you are a family member or not, is going to go through the same process where you enroll, you complete an application, send it in, and then there's going to be both an orientation that you have to attend and a background check that has to be done. And oftentimes these happen sort of all together, that you might go to orientation and submit your fingerprints while you're there, or you might do the orientation and they'll tell you where to go, and then you go and submit your fingerprints there. It's going to happen something along those lines. And once that's done, then you have to get assigned to a case. So you have to have a recipient in mind. I mean, you can become a provider and just be on there. Actually, the registry is going away now that I think about it. You can become a provider without a recipient already, but you won't be able to actually claim any hours or do any work until you are assigned to a recipient, right? So if you're a family member of someone who just got IHSS, they probably already are aware. And the social worker just needs to say, okay, you're going to be the provider. This is the recipient. They've just been approved for hours. I'm going to assign it to you. Then you can start claiming hours. But if you don't have a person already, then you're going to have to find someone, right? And there was a registry of providers that was being upkept by the state for anyone who was available and was just looking for someone who they needed to care for. But I think this year that's going away, probably. So I wouldn't count on that. But again, this is the same whether you're a family member or not. The process is the same. But it does take a while. And this is the thing. So the background check on the short side takes like 2 weeks. That's if everything's, goes smoothly. And if you're maybe in an area that's not very busy, 2 weeks. But it can be longer, up to 4, even 5 weeks for the background check to finish. And then the orientation, I think those happen at least once a month, maybe even more often than that in most places. So that's not usually a problem. And one thing that a lot of people do to try to make this process a bit smoother is if you are a family member and you have someone, a recipient in mind who's going through the process, right about the same time as when the assessment takes place is usually a good time to start the provider enrollment, right? To send in your application, to get the fingerprinting done, do orientation. A lot of providers will do that while they're waiting for the county to approve the recipient, because that also is a process that can take somewhere between 3 and 4 weeks. So if you start those about the same time, You do the assessment, you immediately start provider enrollment. By the time the case is approved, you'll be pretty close to being done with becoming a provider. So that's I'd say a good way to handle it. Of course, if you don't have a recipient, nothing you do about that. You just got to wait out the length of the process. But yeah, it's good to start that process right about then. Now, there is some counties that are a bit slower in this process, that they've got a backlog of providers and it might take social workers some time to assign the case to the provider. This is all fine. Even if it takes several weeks longer to get started, no matter how long it takes to get yourself onboarded, you can always get paid back to whenever you started working. Even if you weren't a provider back then, as soon as the recipient applies for IHSS, no matter how long that process takes, whether it's 3 months, 4 months, once they get approved, IHSS will give them hours all the way back to the date of application. And if you were with them providing services for them all the way back then you can get paid for all those months. Now, if you are not a family member, if you weren't living in the same home and you weren't helping with these tasks, then you can only start from when you began helping them, which might be later on down the line. But if you're a parent and it's your child who's getting IHSS, then right from the date of application, once you are officially made a provider, you can get paid all the way back to then, even if it's several months in the past. Now, in some other cases, it's going to be less often when it's like a parent-child relationship, but recipients can have multiple providers and providers can have multiple recipients. And this can get a little bit complicated, but let's take them one at a time. So a provider with multiple recipients isn't that big a deal. It's really a lot simpler, where you can just have one recipient, like I said before, who needs 15 hours and another that needs 25 hours. And you work part of the day at one recipient's house, then you drive to the other recipient and you work the rest of the day at the other person's house. And if you are a provider with multiple recipients, you can get extra time for the travel in between, right? I believe it's up to 7 hours a week total that you can get for travel time. And that's no matter how many recipients. You could have 10 recipients. They're still only going to give you up to 7 hours a week of travel time. But so if one recipient needs 15, another needs 25, and you have 7 hours of travel time, then you can work a total of 47 hours in a week. Now, you could work even more than that if you have more recipients, but you can only get a certain amount of travel time. A recipient's maximum is the same as an individual did I say recipient? A provider's maximum is the same as an individual recipient's maximum. So each recipient can get 283 hours per month of IHSS. Each provider can only provide 283 hours per month of IHSS. Now, there also are some exceptions. Maybe we can get to that later, but that's the basics of what a provider can do for their recipients. I think Teresa added some context here for what I'd said earlier. Come on. Sorry, tech difficulty. There it is. As of 2024 budget proposal, the registry list itself where you find available providers is not going away. However, the specialized backup provider program is facing elimination cut. Oh, okay. So there'll still be a list, but there's a program for helping someone find a secondary provider that's what's being eliminated. Okay, so I was confused on that. There is still a way to find providers. It sounds like there's still a way to find providers if you need them. Regardless, it is still true that the vast majority of providers of IHSS are going to be friends and family. That still is how it works most of the time for most people. All right, I see another question here. I'm going to jump to that before I get back to the main topic. Annie said, I had my son's reassessment. When I got my NOA, the worker removed bowel Okay, all right. I think there was a short glitch. I'm back. Um, I mean, I see no reason not to. It's strange that, let me think, bowel and bladder care, bathing, oral hygiene, grooming. Now, some of those, the bathing, oral hygiene, grooming, they might have said, oh well, he shouldn't have been getting this because he was below. I think 8 years old is where they typically will give oral hygiene, grooming, and bathing. But bowel and bladder care he's within the age range, so I don't see why they would remove that unless they had a really good reason, right? I mean, even you say he still needs the services, even if he only needed verbal prompting to use the bathroom, instructions, don't forget to wash your hands, don't forget to, pull up your pants or wipe, whatever. Even if he only needed a little bit of help in those categories, for the bowel and bladder care specifically, there's no reason he shouldn't have at least gotten some hours. Now, maybe they heard you say something that they took a different way. Maybe they heard you say that, oh, he's doing a lot better. He's able to use the bathroom. We don't really have to watch him in the bathroom anymore. Maybe they heard something like that and they took that to mean that he didn't need any help at all. But yeah, if you're saying he definitely still needs help in those areas, I would appeal it. It's possible. Again, it's been a little bit since I've checked the list. It's possible that bathing, oral hygiene, and grooming, they might say that that's not actually a category he qualifies for until he's 8 years old. In which case, you'd have to say that there is a extraordinary need, that there's some exception that he needs significantly more care in that area than a typical 7-year-old would. But for the bowel and bladder care, any level of assistance that he needs, he should be getting hours for it. Okay. So I mentioned the two weirder scenarios. So the provider with multiple recipients, not that complicated. It's fairly simple. The recipient with multiple providers can be a little bit trickier. It's really just a matter of sharing the work, right? If one recipient has 100 hours in a month that they need to do, or they need assistance with, then multiple providers have to figure out how they're going to share that load. They can do it 50-50, 60-40, is one going to do 75 and the other 25. Officially, it is the recipient who determines which provider is going to be doing what work, right? It is the recipient who has the final say in how the hours are going to be split between their providers. Now, this definitely should be a conversation that everyone is involved with, and everybody's on board with. And it should never come as a surprise to any providers how many hours they're going to be claiming this month. Because you never want a situation where one provider goes in and claims all the hours or most of the hours, and the other provider goes in and is like shocked to find out that they have no hours to claim, even though they did all this work. That should never happen. So it should always be very clearly discussed between the recipient and all of their providers how much each one of them is going to do, and specifically which tasks they're going to do. You don't want to double up on, everybody do the same thing. In a scenario where the recipient is incapable of making those decisions, then it would be whoever their authorized representative is, a parent or their closest relative, or whoever the primary provider is. Their authorized representative would then make those decisions and figure out how many hours each provider is going to do. In essence, this is employment, right? So if you, as a provider, you're working for a recipient, but they're like, well, we want you to show up every day, but we only want you to work for 1 hour a day because the other provider is going to be doing 90% of the work. You don't have to do it, right? It's like, this is an employment contract. If you can find better things elsewhere, that's fine. Don't feel like you have to work for less hours than you're willing to do. That's a conversation that everyone has to really be on board with and everyone has to agree on. Annie, to follow up on your question, you said he's still in pull-ups. Yeah, absolutely. If your child is 7 years old and still in pull-ups, and unless for some reason, if for some reason the county determined that he didn't meet one of the other qualifications for IHSS as a whole, such as that he did not have any kind of disability, whether physical or mental, then technically they could take away all of his hours if they thought he didn't have a disability at all. But I find that unlikely. So if he's 7 years old still in pull-ups, then yeah, I think he definitely would qualify still for bowel and bladder care. Amanda said, "Hi, my daughter's primary care physician retired. Can the nurse practitioner fill out IHSS yearly paperwork?" It's a little bit iffy. I wouldn't say there is a definitive answer on the yearly paperwork. One of the mandatory documents, the SOC 873, which is the document you have to get filled out in order to get IHSS, and it has to be filled out by a medical professional. On that form, it specifically lists a licensed nurse practitioner as a valid person to have fill out that form. But that is not one of the forms that they have you fill out every year. That is just for when you first apply. The other form doesn't list specifically who is or is not qualified to fill out the form, except that the SOC 821, which is one of the primary ones, there is a rule that's a little bit obscure that gives the criteria that it should be someone whose scope of practice includes the issues of memory, orientation, and judgment, which is debatably, it's debatable whether or not that would include a nurse practitioner. But I've had other counties say that the person who fills out the 821 has to be someone who is qualified or capable of assigning a diagnosis to a person, but I don't know if that's really backed up by regulation. The only other really relevant document is the paramedical form. And I think the paramedical form, it's fine if the nurse fills it out as long as they work under the doctor who prescribed the paramedical services in the first place. So it's because it says it's supposed to be the doctor who is overseeing the paramedical services, who fills out the paramedical form. If their nurse who works in their office and works for them does it, it's probably fine. But yeah, it's a bit of a gray area in some ways. Kathy said, Medi-Cal will pay for pull-ups. Yes, there is. I think that I don't recall what it's called. There's like a part of Medi-Cal, it might be called Blue Shield, or I might be thinking of something totally different, that will pay for the diapers themselves, but IHSS will pay for any work you as the parent have to do to clean up after your child for the bowel and bladder related incidents. So there's two different things they're paying for two different things. So Medi-Cal will pay for the diapers, IHSS will pay for the work. Okay, where was I? Okay, so we talked about multiple providers, we talked about multiple recipients. So there is a question. Did my image go? Okay. Sorry, I don't know what's going on with the internet today. It's cutting out every once in a while. So there is some disqualifying factors in which a person cannot be a provider. Now let me try and read these. Let me read these carefully, make sure I don't get these wrong. You're disqualified if you are if you have committed a tier 1 or tier 2 crime within the last 10 years. Now, the tier 2 crimes are things that are generally felonies, usually violent or serious felonies or fraud. And those will disqualify you for 10 years unless the recipient specifically signs that they are aware of the previous conviction and they still want you to be the provider anyway. The tier 1 crimes are specific abuse crimes, abuse of a child, abuse of a senior, or fraud against a government program. So essentially, if you've done something that specifically is a crime that is extremely relevant to your work as a provider, then you are disqualified, and the recipient cannot sign you as a provider no matter what. They cannot sign a waiver to allow you to be their provider, even if they want to. So certain felonies, they will disqualify you for 10 years, but you can get a waiver if the recipient wants you as a provider. But specifically, abuse against children or elderly or dependent adults or fraud against a government program will completely disqualify you. And I think that's also within the last 10 years, but I'm not sure. Those might actually be permanent. Say Rosita's here. Hello. Just want to, don't want to miss anyone. Travel pay and vacation pay, or rather travel pay and sick pay. These are two different things that get a lot we get a lot of questions about these, and it can be a little bit complicated sometimes, especially when it comes to travel. Sick pay is a little bit simpler, but travel can get a little bit complicated. Now, if you're staying within the state, no big deal. If you as a provider, you're staying within the state and your recipient's going with you, pretty much. I just realized this part of the outline is actually about what I talked about earlier about traveling between two recipients and getting paid 7 hours a week, but that's fine. That's fine. I'll talk about what I wanted to talk about anyway. We'll have to do it all from memory. So traveling as a provider with the recipient, if you're within the state, you're fine. If you travel out of the state, you will be fine if you're together for at least 30 days. Once 30 days have passed, then the county is supposed to reach out to you and make sure that you intend to return, right? If you're gone, man, I think we did a live about this recently, but I'm trying to remember the details. If you return within 30 days, it's totally fine. If you are prevented from returning, but you intend to, but you're prevented from, someone got sick or something changed in your travel plans, then as long as the county reaches out to you and you let them know that you plan to return and that you had a reason why you were prevented, then they will keep your hours going. You can continue claiming hours. And this can go, I believe, as long as 6 months, where if there is still a compelling, unavoidable reason why you have to stay longer than 60 days, 90 days, they can continue your hours indefinitely. Not indefinitely. They can continue their hours as long as they have compelling reason to believe that you are prevented from returning and that you intend to return. If they have any reason to believe that you are actually establishing residency in another state, then they can terminate your hours right away. If they believe that you no longer have a house in California and you now have bought a house in another state, then they're going to say, well, clearly they don't intend to come back to California, so we're not going to continue them on IHSS. So that's sort of their criteria. After 6 months, they have to then stop your case. I think you might be able to get it resumed once you come back, but they cannot keep paying you at that point, I'm pretty sure. Traveling out of the country is both simpler and a lot less wiggle room. When you're out of the country, if you're gone for more than 30 days, your case is cut off. And you'll have to restart it when you come back. If I got any of those details wrong, we might post a follow-up. But yeah, I think we did a more comprehensive talk about this before. That might have been a little bit more accurate. This is just off the top of my memory. Sick time is something that the other thing we get a lot of questions about. So a lot of times providers will ask how sick pay works. And this especially happens right around the summertime when the fiscal year rolls over, because all providers across the whole state will start getting these notifications around June or July that says the year is going to roll over on this date. I think it's somewhere in July when the fiscal year rolls over, and it says you have unused sick pay, and any unused sick pay, it will be lost if you don't use it. So this is something that whenever this happens, you get these notifications, everyone starts having questions about, do I have to use it all? Can I use it with my regular hours? If I don't use it, does it roll over? Can I just get a paycheck for all that time I didn't use? And for a lot of these questions, the answer is no. You cannot, it does not roll over like it might for another job. You cannot just claim it. You can't just get a lump sum claim it. As for, you don't have to use it. Like if you just don't want to use your sick pay, you don't have to use it. But as they say in that notification, it just gets lost, right? It's just, if you don't use it, that's just, states saving themselves money. In other jobs here at Galt Advocacy, they're very nice to us. And if we have vacation time or sick time that we don't use, start of the next year, it just gets saved and we can, build it up. But that's not the case for being an IHSS provider. Now, the big question mark is, can you just use it whenever you want? And I think we've gone back and forth, and we've been a little bit hesitant to give a definitive answer about this, because when you read it straightforward in the law, it says sick pay is to be used when you're sick, right? When you can't do the work, you claim your sick pay, which makes sense. And the idea would be that you as the provider, you get sick, you can't help your recipient. So the recipient has someone else fill in, one of those backup providers that nobody can ever find, has them fill in, do the work for that day, and then you as the provider claim sick time and get paid. However, as a lot of people know, and a lot of you watching might be in this situation, if you're the parent of someone and you live in a house with them, when you get sick, you keep doing the work because no one else is going to come in and be a provider while you're there being sick. And when you get sick, the recipient probably gets sick too. Actually, the recipient probably got sick first and gave it to you. So it's very likely that as a provider, if you were providing for your own child, you're going to keep doing the work even while you're sick. And so the question is, well, can I claim the sick hours and still do the work? In an abundance of caution, we've always said no, but I want to be totally honest and say that I've seen a lot of people online, other providers, who talk about doing this, who they as providers will work their 10 hours a day and then claim 12 hours of sick pay in that very same day and work their entire work week, fill up to their maximum, and then claim sick pay on top of that, and they get paid just fine. At least that's what I've heard them say. But I am not convinced that this is the way the system's supposed to work, right? I'm not convinced that this isn't possibly a violation that the counties just sort of allow to happen, right? So I don't recommend doing that. I recommend, if you want to use your sick pay, and it's basically free money, so go ahead and do it. Take a day for your mental health, right? Take a vacation day for yourself. Have another family member step in and be the provider for that day. Let them get paid for that one day. You can get paid your sick pay. Do that a couple times a year, and then you don't have to worry about violating the rules, and you can still get a vacation for yourself, get some time off to just relax and refresh yourself. You can use your hours, you can get some time off, and you don't have to worry about possibly running afoul of the provider rules. Because if we're saying that being a provider is just like any other job, at any other job, they wouldn't allow you to show up to work and claim sick pay for the same day. They also wouldn't allow you to work 5 days in the week and then call in on your days off and say, I'd like sick pay because I'm sick on my days off. So to me, it doesn't really make sense to claim hours and sick pay in the same week. But like I said, being fully transparent, I have seen people say they do that, and I've not seen anyone said they've gotten violations for it, but I'd still say be careful. All right, let me look through the sorry. Let me look through the outline, see if there's anything else that I missed or want to go over. But again, if you have any follow-up questions or anything else that you want me to touch on, put in the comment section and we can get to it. We've got a few minutes left before we have to head off here. Workers' comp, taxes. Oh, taxes is a big one. So like we've been talking about how there's two different kinds of providers. There's like the family members, and there's, there's people who come into the house and do the work. The more accurate, sorry, my nose is all itchy today. The more accurate delineation is live-in providers versus non-live-in providers. And the biggest difference between them, other than, you can't get travel pay if you're a live-in provider because you're already there. Biggest difference between them is that a live-in provider, their taxes are exempt if they want them to be. So all the wages you get from IHSS as a live-in provider, you can fill out the SOC 2298 and have your wages exempt from taxes, which a lot of people want to do that. Now, there are some scenarios where you might prefer not to have your wages exempt for other, Medi-Cal benefit purposes. But that is one of the big perks of being a live-in provider, is that you have that option. If you are not a live-in provider, if you travel to the recipient's house, then you cannot have your wages exempt. I did talk a little bit about violations. So if you are a provider and you fill in your time card, you say you work a certain number of hours, but for some reason it exceeds your maximum. You claim too many hours in a day, too many hours in a week. You claimed hours that someone else already claimed, things like that. Then you can earn a violation. Now, it takes a while before these actually are. It takes a while before these actually affect your ability to be a provider, but these can build up over time. So the first violation is just a warning. The second violation is also a warning, but they will also ask you to do a retraining. And if you complete the retraining, then they'll take this violation off of your record. If you earn a third violation without removing one, the third violation, I think, is like a 1-month suspension, I believe. And then a fourth violation is that you are cut off from being a provider and you cannot re-enroll for a whole year. So it does take quite a few before you get suspended or terminated as a provider, but it does happen. I believe I've heard that the second violation, where you can do a retraining to remove it, I think if you don't do them too quickly, you can get it removed multiple times. And I believe the violations by themselves do naturally fall off after a year or 6 months, something like that. Vanessa said, hello, my daughter has an in-home assessment next Friday for IHSS, and they want a copy of her IEP. Do I give social worker the entire file or the most recent notes from the last meeting? She transferred to a new school about a month ago, so I'm not sure if they want notes from her previous school too. I'd say in your scenario, you never have to give them anything, even if they ask for it. Generally, if they do specifically ask, it's better to give it and just, know what you're giving them and know how to argue for the need. Because if you hold on to it, it's going to look bad. Now, as in your situation, where there's a little bit of a there's the old school and the new school, and they might not even have a full IEP at the new school yet. You kind of have options that when they ask for the IEP, you can say, well, at the new school, this is all we have. And just give them that if you think that that's going to be the most helpful. But if you look at the old IEP and you say, this is actually a lot more beneficial, has a much better view of the need, then you could even say, yeah, here's the IEP, and withhold the more recent meeting notes if you think they're less beneficial, or you could give both if you think they're both good. But in this position, I'd say you have options to interpret what they want in a way that will, give them the most accurate view of your daughter's situation. So if the new school has a better handle on it, I'd say give them the new meeting notes as the old school did, give them that. And if both of them have good information in them, you can give both. I'll say, just as an aside from that we find oftentimes that the IEPs are more detrimental than they are helpful. So limiting the amount that you can give the social workers as far as the IEP goes is, I would say, more often than not going to be the better option, but it really will depend on exactly how your IEP looks. Okay, we're at 12:45. Let me see if there's any last minute things that I want to go over. I don't know if I really went over how to fill out the timesheets, but I'll do that briefly as we're wrapping up here. I did mention that when you become a provider, you need the social worker to link you to a recipient, right? And so that could take a little while depending on how slow they are, but that is a necessary step before you can start claiming hours. Once you have that, you go on to the online portal for providers. You'll see your recipient on there, be able to open up the timesheet for the month, for the 2-week period, I think it is, and start filling in the hours. Now, you'll be told a weekly maximum, and there's going to be there's a weekly maximum and a monthly maximum. Now, it's more important that you stay within the weekly maximum on your hours, but you still want to make sure you don't go too low, or else you might not claim all the hours in the month. So take the weekly maximum, lower it by a little bit, and fill that in each day. That should get you pretty close. And then the last 1 or 2 days will have to be a little more, a little less than your typical one for each day. It's a bit of math, but usually once you do it once, once you've done the math and you figured out how many hours you need to put in for each day for a 30-day month, you can pretty much just do that for every month except February, and you should be all right. That's something else that when we have clients here, we help them out with figuring out for what their monthly maximum is, how much they should be doing per week, but it's something you can figure out with a little bit of practice. The most important thing is you don't want to go over, because then you might earn a violation. But I think usually with the online system these days, it typically won't allow you to submit your hours if you've claimed more than your maximum, or at the very least, it'll pop up with a box saying you're over your maximum, and then you can go back and fix it. Renee said, my 18-year-old son still pees all over the restroom. Well, if he has IHSS, that's definitely something they should be giving you time for, possibly for more than just bowel and bladder care. That could also count as domestic cleaning, but that could just be bowel and bladder care with an exceptional need over and above even a certain level. I hope this is related to IHSS and you weren't just telling me that. But yes, that's absolutely a category that you should get time for. Um, I assume this is Teresa that's responding. It says, if your IEP does not support your case, ask to get amended. Tell the social worker is in the process of getting amended, and you'll get to her once you have it. But until then, please use the information. To tell them to use the information you gave them at the assessment. That is very very good advice. Now the amendments can only sometimes can only go so far, and of course you can't get the old one at your previous school. Can't get that amended because you're not there anymore, and so that IEP is pretty much set in stone. But again, you don't have to give them that one. You can give them the new one instead. Renee followed up, said yes. Okay, related to IHSS. Just wanted to make sure. Lixia Hall, maybe distant cousin. They have program in Bay Area and Regional Center pay for wipes. Oh, is this related? I think maybe for something that we said way earlier about Medi-Cal paying for the diapers and other things. I think that's probably related to that. We were talking about how your son's in diapers. There are several helps for you. Like the Medi-Cal might pay for diapers. It sounds the regional center has other things that they pay for as well. And IHSS pays for the hands-on support. So there's a lot of supports out there. And what Myra, at our seminar, she talks about her story and how she got to this point of helping people with special needs, is that the supports are out there. There's just no one to tell you about them, right? The doctors aren't trained to tell you about IHSS or about adoption assistance or these other things, maybe about the adoption assistance, but a lot of the supports and the benefits and the things that you're entitled to as a parent of a special needs child, you have no way of knowing about. And so that's part of the reason why our company exists and others like us. And it's a big part of why so many groups on Facebook are trying to share this information and let everybody else know about it. It's like, hey, if you have a child with special needs, there's things for you. There's IHSS, there's SSI, there's SSDI, there's all kinds of other things. Teresa said, speaking of the seminar, we're wrapping up here. It's about time. I can see Myra's chomping at the bit to get in here and do her live. But speaking of the seminar, we do have 2 seminars back to back coming up in Southern California. The first one is they're both this month. We've been talking about them for about a month, but they're coming up now. It's like just over 2 weeks away. The first one is April the 25th. That's on Saturday in Orange County. And the other one is the 26th. That's Sunday in Glendale. Both later this month. Here is the link for signing up to that. That's on our website. They're both completely free. They run from about 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock with maybe some time afterwards that you might be able to, catch one of the advocates and talk to them one-on-one while you're there. But it goes over all things special needs, IHSS, protective supervision, SSI, special education, regional center. I think also we have a section about adult and elderly care as well. So all kinds of topics. Look forward to it. Myra Galt is going to be there. Advocate Myra is going to be there. Michelle, Lori, possibly, and Nicole as well. So it's going to be a whole girls event, but the men are welcome to show up as well. So look forward to it. And if you sign up on our seminar or sign up for the seminar online ahead of time, when you show up for the free seminar, you get a gift card. So we are actually giving out money at this seminar. I don't know how we're doing that, but that's what we're doing. As a thank you and to make up for any gas, parking, food expenses, things like that. So look forward to that. And with that, I'm going to make way so that Myra or Nicole can come in here and do the live in Spanish. If you speak Spanish, you can join us on our Spanish Facebook page or on YouTube. And watch them. They're going to have the same topic. So if you have any other follow-up questions I did not get to, go ahead and watch us in Spanish. All right. See y'all next week. Wait, no, maybe. Is it next week or the week after? We're going to be off for 1 week because of the seminar, but we will be back after that. So either next week or the week after, we won't be here, but we'll see you again soon.